Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Love, Lies, and Betrayal. Let's move to the video. It all began a few months after Mom passed away. Life in our house became quiet, almost eerily so, as if the walls themselves were mourning her absence. Dad and I rarely spoke beyond the usual greetings and mundane household matters. I assumed we were both coping in our own way, but one evening, something changed. I was sitting in the living room flipping through old photo albums. Mom's laughter seemed to echo from the images, her bright eyes beaming at me, even through the faded pages I didn't hear. Please subscribe to my channel so I can continue to bring you more interesting true stories like this, and don't forget to watch this video till the end, because this story is going to be very interesting. Dad entered the room until he spoke. Looking through memories, he asked softly, his voice carrying a mix of sorrow and tenderness. I nodded, unable to speak for fear that my voice would break. He sat beside me closer than he had in months, and took the album from my hands. "We were lucky to have her," he said, flipping through the pictures. His hand trembled slightly as he traced Mom's face in one of the photos. "She was everything to me. I felt a lump in my throat to me too," I whispered. We sat in silence for a while, flipping through the pages together. I didn't realize how much I missed having this kind of connection with him, just sitting close, sharing a moment. It reminded me of the times we'd all sat together as a family before everything changed. "I know I haven't been the best father lately," he admitted after a long pause. "I've been lost without her, and I'm sorry if I've made you feel alone." His words struck a chord deep within me. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear them until that moment. "It's been hard for both of us," I replied. "But I don't blame you, Dad." He smiled faintly, the lines on his face softening. "You're more like her than you realize. Kind, forgiving." His voice trailed off, and for a moment I thought he might cry. Instead, he placed his hand gently on mine. "I don't want to lose you too," he said. The sincerity in his eyes was overwhelming. I squeezed his hand in reassurance. "You won't." From that evening on, things began to shift between us. Dad started making more of an effort, cooking dinner, asking about my day, even joining me for walks in the park. It was comforting, but also unsettling in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. He was more attentive than ever, almost as if he were trying to fill the void Mom had left as the days passed. The atmosphere in our house seemed to shift. Dad's presence felt heavier, but not in an oppressive way, more like he was trying to bridge a gap that I didn't even know was there. I began to notice the small gestures, how he'd pause and wait for me to finish speaking, the way he started leaving my favorite snacks on the kitchen counter, and how he would ask if I wanted to watch a movie together in the evenings. At first I thought nothing of it. After all, we were both adjusting to life without Mom, and we needed to support each other in whatever way we could. But then something happened that made me feel uneasy one evening. I came downstairs to find Dad sitting on the couch, flipping through the TV channels. He looked up when he heard me, his face lighting up with a smile. "Hey, why don't you join me? We haven't done this in a while," he suggested, patting the seat beside him. I hesitated, feeling a sudden discomfort I couldn't quite place. I had gotten used to sitting on the other side of the room during these moments, but tonight, something felt different. His invitation wasn't just casual, it almost felt like an invitation to be closer. I sat down beside him, trying to shake off the feeling in the pit of my stomach as we watched the movie. Dad's arm brushed against mine, and I could tell he was trying to be subtle about it, but the touch lingered longer than it should have. I stiffened, unsure of how to react. I told myself it was just a mistake, that it was all in my head. After all, we were grieving, and this was just his way of trying to comfort me, right? But the next day it happened again. This time, when we were sitting at the kitchen table, he reached over to touch my hand as he handed me a cup of coffee. His fingers lingered, and when I looked up, I saw something in his eyes, something I had never seen before. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt thick, charged, like we were both holding our breath. "I'm sorry," Dad said quickly, pulling his hand back. His face flushed slightly and he looked away. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's fine, Dad," I said. Though I wasn't entirely sure it was that afternoon, I took a long walk to clear my head. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Was I overreacting, or was there something more to his behavior? When I returned home, I found Dad sitting in the living room staring out the window. He looked lost in thought, as though he was struggling with something inside himself. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to ask him about what had happened to get clarity, but another part of me was afraid of the answer. "Are you okay?" I finally asked, my voice hesitant. He turned to face me, his expression soft but tired. "I'm just trying to figure things out," he said quietly. "I know this has been hard on both of us, and I don't know how to make it right." The vulnerability in his voice made me want to reach out to him, to comfort him, the way he had tried to comfort me, but the nagging feeling in my chest wouldn't go away after the incident with Dad's lingering touch. I couldn't shake the feeling that things between us were starting to blur. I kept telling myself it was just grief, that we were both struggling in our own ways. But every time Dad got too close, my heart would race, and I couldn't help but feel like there was something more beneath the surface. A few days later, I was sitting in my room trying to study when Dad knocked softly on the door. "Can we talk for a minute?" he asked. I put my pen down and nodded, trying to appear calm. I could sense the tension in his voice, something that was unspoken, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to confront it. He sat down on the edge of my bed facing me, his hands clasped together. "I know things have been strange," he began, his voice low. "I've been thinking about what's happened lately, and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable." I stared at him, unsure of how to respond. The last few days had been filled with an undercurrent of unspoken words and gestures that left me confused. "I've been trying so hard to keep it together for you," he continued. "But I think I might be making things worse. I'm sorry if I've overstepped. I don't know how to cope without your mom, and I found myself leaning on you more than I should." His words made my heart ache, but they also made my skin crawl. I knew he was grieving, but the way he was looking at me now felt different from the fatherly love I had known. It was as though he was searching for something in me, something that wasn't just a daughter's comfort. "I understand, Dad," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I know it's been hard for both of us, but we have to be careful, okay? I don't want to feel like I'm the one holding everything together." "I know," he replied quietly. "I don't want to make you feel like that. It's just sometimes I feel like you're all I have left." His words hung in the air like a cloud. I didn't know how to respond to them without sounding cold or distant. I didn't want to push him away, but I also didn't know how to help him without compromising my own sense of comfort. Over the next few days, things felt even more strained. Dad continued to be overly attentive, constantly checking in on me, offering help with things I didn't need every time I tried to create some space. He would step closer, whether it was standing too close while I was cooking or offering to walk me to school in the morning. One afternoon, when I was reading in the living room, he came in and sat beside me this time. He didn't say anything. He simply sat there, his shoulder brushing against mine. I could feel the warmth of his body next to mine, and once again that feeling of unease washed over me. His proximity wasn't just comforting, it was suffocating. I stood up abruptly, my heart racing. "I need to go for a walk," I said, my voice shaky. Dad looked up, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you sure you don't have to?" "I'm fine, Dad. I just need some space." I interrupted, unable to explain what was really going on in my head. I left the house quickly, stepping into the fresh air in an attempt to clear my mind, but it didn't help. I couldn't stop thinking about the way Dad was acting, his touch, his lingering gaze, the way he seemed to be trying so hard to fill the emptiness that Mom had left behind. I couldn't help but wonder if I was the one filling that void now, and if I was, what did that mean for us? That the days that followed were a mix of confusion and self-reflection. I couldn't shake the unease that seemed to follow me everywhere I went. Dad continued his efforts to reconnect with me, but his actions, though kind, began to feel unsettling. It was as if he was grasping for something that he couldn't name, and in the process, I felt more and more like I was losing myself. One evening I returned home from a walk to find Dad waiting for me in the living room. He was sitting on the couch, hands folded in his lap, as if he had been thinking deeply about something. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "As soon as I entered, I know I've been different lately. I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I think I've realized something." I stayed silent, unsure of where this conversation was headed. The way he was speaking felt serious, and I braced myself for whatever was to come. "I've been trying to make up for everything I lost." He continued, his voice softer now. "But I've been leaning on you too much. You're not Mom, and I've been asking things of you that aren't fair. I'm sorry if I've made you feel like I was expecting something from you that wasn't right." His words hung heavy in the air. I felt a rush of relief mixed with lingering confusion. He finally acknowledged it, finally recognized that his actions had crossed a line, though he hadn't meant for them to. "I don't want to lose you two," he said quietly, "but I know I need to find a way to heal without relying on you in ways I shouldn't." It was the first time I felt like we were on the same page. The tension that had been building between us started to dissolve, and I felt a shift in the way I looked at him. His grief had been consuming, and while it had led him to seek comfort in ways that were hard for me to understand, I now realized that he wasn't trying to replace Mom. He was just lost, like I was. "We'll get through this," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "We both will, but we have to heal in our own way together, but separately, you know?" Dad nodded, the weight on his face. Lifting for the first time in months, he looked like a father again, strong yet vulnerable, and trying to do what was best for both of us. From that moment on, things started to improve. We found a new rhythm, one that allowed space for both of us to grieve in our own way without crossing boundaries. There were still hard days when I felt the absence of Mom more than I wanted to, but we learned to lean on each other in healthier ways. It wasn't easy and it wasn't perfect, but it was the start of something new, a way forward that honored Mom's memory and allowed Dad and me to heal without the weight of unnecessary expectations. And in that healing, I found something important. I realized that while we might never fully understand what happened in the wake of Mom's passing, we could still move forward with love, respect, and a renewed sense of connection. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Don't forget to click the notification bell icon to stay notified.